Let's piggyback off of the Bob Ellis and the constant operations video that we just had. Now let's study the three different types of complexity cases. There are three. One of them is the best case, average case, and then worst case, right? So using the Bob Ellis game, the guessing game, the best case complexity is related to the minimum number of steps required by the algorithm given an ideal set of input values in terms of efficiency. So these input values is n. Okay, so this value ranges from 1 through 1,000. Again, we want to, because that number is a variable, because next time Alice and Bob can do a 1 through million, right? So that number of variable or number of different values is n. Best case complexity is 1, right? Because this means that basically guess takes place only once. So Bob gets it the very first time. Average case complexity is when you're averaging all of the best cases and worst case, and you do something in between, right? So all of the crossing all of the possible set of a value, but you're getting the average number of steps required. So this can go up, this can go down, but it averages somewhere in between, right? So this is the average case complexity. Now, the worst case complexity associated with the Bob Ellis game is 1,000, right? Or in this case, 301, right? If you were to use the civil, the code, pseudocode that we had there. So this is the worst case complexity. So you can basically just make use of the basic accounting, right, on the number of operations, constant time operations to figure out the best case, the average case, and the worst case complexity. Okay, so what does that have to do, right, with our algorithmic, complexities here? Let's move on to the next slide as we will discuss this very topic. So looking at this Bob Ellis game, right, using the sequential search, we were talking about 3001 here. This 3001, right, obviously depends on your counting approach. If you let's say stop counting this, right, this will be 2001, for example. It depends on the language and different levels of language and compilers too. The speeds could be different, but generally speaking, if we fix the language, to fix the language level and fix the compiler, and we fix the CPU and we make sure that your computer is not running on any other thing but this program, and then we just keep on just doing it over and over again, maybe executing the sequential search, 100,000 times, the amount of time it takes, right, is probably 2 milliseconds or maybe 3 milliseconds. It doesn't go beyond that, because all of these operations are constant, right? It takes taking the same amount of time. So this is simple because we've got only 3001 operations. What if you have something that is very, very complicated, an algorithm that takes several pages to write? And of course, no one's going to have the time to sit there and start counting, number of operations. So generally, what we like to do as a computer scientist is generalize, right, the number of complexities that we've got or the number of operations that we've got. Usually, we pick the most significant ones, meaning operation that takes the most iterations, right? Perform the most and basically count it. So in this case, if you were talking about the Alice and Bob game, the most is n, right? This n is the 1,000, right? So we couldn't care less. Remember, there is a set, right? Set guess, right, equals 0. This is one operation we don't even look at. We look at the number of times this thing will iterate. And typically, the most significant iteration is really that for loop, right? 1 to 1,000. And we know that each for loop is going to give you, announcement, right? And there is a increment, right? Guess plus plus. And then there is an announcement, right? Bob is going to say, hey, I got this. Announce guess. Yeah, sure. This is going to be 1,000. This is going to be 1,000. And there is a guess, right? If you recall what we had, equals K. So this is a comparison of the two value. Yes, everything is inside the iterations. But we don't really look at this anymore. We just look at the number of counts. Number of iterations that we've got there is 1 to the n. So you can pretty much, it's the formalize this entire problem in terms of a variable n, right? And this is also important to think about when we're talking about n. N could be anything, right? So what is n? N is a variable, okay? And this variable is changing, okay? So this variable could be 1 million. This variable could be 10. This variable could be 29. This variable could be 100, right? So generally what we want to do is to identify that changing variable, right, inside a fundamental operations or inside an algorithms, right? And we eliminate all of the non-relevant or not the most significant operations, like the small operation that counts only once, or iteration that only has 10 iterations. These are constant that we know of, but we are interested in the variable, okay? So in this case, n, or 1,000. Okay, so that goes into this topic called what is the input size, which is the next step, right? To make our count generally usable, we express it as a function of the size of the problem. So the size of the problem is 1,000, right? So in this case, what we want to do is to write, right, for sequential search, there's going to be n number of, right, iterations. And that's what we call O of n, okay? Now, if you're talking about binary search is using a binary methodology to search for a specific value, right, inside your binary tree. And usually that search results in a logarithmic log n complexity. And that complexity is expressed in terms of, we'll talk about big O in the next lecture, but that's what we're interested in. So sequential search, linear search, O of n, okay, O of n. And that n is a changing, right, variable. Well, when we say variable, a variable itself is changing, right? Because it could be 1, it could be 2, it could be 3, doesn't matter. But generally, that's how we are. That's how we use this letter n to express the efficiency of an algorithms, right? So this O of n could be in terms of time, or it could also be in terms of space, right? In this case, we're using it to express time.